We're live. All right. Welcome everyone to QuaranCon Cubed. That is QuaranCon continuing content. I like clunky names and then I like reducing them to numerals. We are here today with the inimitable Intisar Khanani. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm so excited to talk to you about Thorn, which I thoroughly enjoyed reading. Everyone, the links should all be in the description. I think I put them there when I first listed the video. So go check that out if you haven't read Thorn. What are you doing with your life? Go read it. And we'll talk more about it in a bit. We're going to start with some not strictly writing and book related questions and then move on to book related questions and try to keep things live. But thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat today.
So I have questions up already. I don't know why I swiped that way. My questions are over here. Oh gosh, no! Why is there volume on? Sorry.
And we will talk about.
Okay. 20-second delay on the YouTube thing, and that is always muted, and I don't know why. I don't know how it became
These things
unmuted.
always happen when you need them to not.
I think it's because I did an update maybe, and so the settings weren't left over from the last time I had opened Safari. But I apologize for that, everyone. Okay, so unfortunately, that's one of the things that you can't fix in advance either, because you can't mute it until it's actually live on YouTube.
It's live, yeah.
But our first question is I was delighted to discover when I'm reading your bio that that you have moved around a ton too, which is like the defining feature of my childhood. And so I'm very curious to talk about that and how your experience moving around a bunch and how many places have you lived and how did you feel about moving around a bunch as a kid?
Let's see. I was born in Wisconsin and I was there roughly 6 months. So I like to joke that I'm a cheesehead, but I'm not really. And that kind of set the tone for my life. So we moved around a bunch. My parents are originally from Pakistan and they made the attempt at that point to move back to Pakistan.
Okay.
And I kind of threw a wrench in the works because I got really, really sick and almost died.
Oh no!
I was like, all right, we're going back to the U.S. for treatment now.
Oh no! I'm so sorry.
And they never tried to make that move again.
Oh, bless it. I mean, that would be super traumatic, right? If your child got really, really sick.
But we moved to Saudi Arabia after that. My dad got a job working with an airline company there. And so actually for the first, 4 or 5 years of my life, I was living in Saudi, but we traveled extensively because those were the days when you got free standby tickets to anywhere. And so my parents would literally pack a carry-on, pick one of us, go to the airport and see where they could get a flight to and just spend the weekend there. It's just like, in retrospect, absolutely stunning, right?
Yeah, totally. But I'm so excited to hear you say that because you're, I think, the only person I've talked to who has had that same experience. My parents were also in the airline industry. That's why we moved around so much. And we had the exact same thing with a ton of free passes. And so we went everywhere.
People are like, oh, where did you first see snow? And I'm like, Seoul, Korea.
Of all the places.
I remember a snowy street from Seoul, Korea. I remember Zurich, there were puppets in the window.
That's so
but yeah, it's an amazing thing to grow up with that. And we actually, when I was 6, we moved to Colorado and lived there about 3 or 4 years. My dad set up a business that then in the '89 recession ended up failing, and so he moved back to Saudi with a different company, and then we followed him there. And then when I was 15, I left Saudi for boarding school, and I lived in New Hampshire for boarding school, started college in Minnesota, then moved back to Colorado to finish college. Spent a few months in Canada for the heck of it, went back to Saudi, and then met my husband and ended up in Ohio. So A lot of different,
as you do,
mostly between the U.S. and Saudi, but a lot of traveling. And in fact, one of the things that was really formative for me was even in Saudi. I went to an international school. There was an American curriculum school but it catered to international students. And my middle school had people from 70 different countries there, and it was amazing. It was, we were all kids hanging out together and playing and doing dumb kid stuff, and reading lots of books if you were me. But you gained an inherent respect for and love for all the awesomeness that was around you, and it didn't occur to you that there was anything unusual about the milieu you were in. And so what stood out to me living there was that I didn't see that world in the books I was reading. It was just really weird. It was, I'd pick up my favorite fantasy reads, and it was medieval Europe and everyone was white, and I was like, man, what a boring place to live.
Right.
What? I mean, true medieval Europe was not actually even like that.
No,
right?
It wasn't nearly that boring.
So that was one of the things that I had to learn coming out of such a wonderfully diverse upbringing, was how to actually write it. Because when I went to write, I wrote white kids in a white world, and I had to learn to reinvent what that world would look like if it actually was based upon any kind of a reality,
right.
Of how our own cultures, mix and exist. So it was that very upbringing is really amazing for perspective.
Totally. So we lived in Germany from 89 to 92, and and I went to an international school that was an IB school, and again, at least 70 countries represented in the student body. Everybody was from everywhere, and it was all, it was business people and diplomats and whatever, children, and so just the idea that the world might be less diverse than that never occurred to me. Like, that was my normal from age 7 to age 10. And then I moved to the US at age 10 and went into a school that only had 2 types of people. And that was like, well, where'd everybody else go? And also everybody was from the US pretty much. So it was like, man, this is boring. In fact, everybody was pretty much from DC. Like, it was, and then Colorado was just like moving into an even less
when I
diverse,
was Colorado from 86 to 90, I was 6 to 10 years old. We were one of 2 families that I'm aware of that were not white in our school. We're not even go into who wasn't Christian, like.
Yeah.
So it was definitely culture shock in its way, to have gone from that extremely diverse, school experience in Saudi as a young child to I was the diversity.
Yeah.
But you asked how I felt about all those different moves, and and it's an interesting question. I think when you move as a child, or at least when I moved as a child, my parents prepped us really well. Like, we got to visit where we were going. They kind of got us excited about it. It never occurred to me that I could have an opinion other than that, oh, okay, we're going. But I was actually I think that the harder part is saying goodbye to friends, and you're gonna experience that anywhere. But pretty much every time we've moved, or I have moved, it's always been like a conscious, positive decision forward.
That's good.
And I think it's not always an easy one, but it's one that says, all right, I'm ready to grow and move, and this will be hard, but I can do it. And it's when I left Colorado in 1990 or 1989, I had a very close friend. I was in 4th grade, and I am still in touch with her, which
nice.
in some ways blows my mind because, you know, this was pre-internet. This was
Right. Yeah.
wrote letters, and it would take
Amazing.
weeks, one direction. You
amazing.
know, if we were lucky. So, you know, you do those friendships that are special to you. You can maintain if you have the will to.
Yeah, that's cool. I've always been so bad at staying in touch with people. So I have reconnected with people in like now in internet ages, right? But I lost touch with most of my friends every time I moved. And in fact, I pretty much am not in touch with anyone from Germany except the daughter of the people who owned the house we rented. I guess our landlord's daughter. And I'm in touch with her a little bit, but none of my friends from that school am I in touch with. Because not only did we leave, but, you know, most of them left shortly afterwards too. You know, like not most people weren't there for more than a few years at a time. And so, and then how do you track anyone down after that? But
there are people I've lost that I wish I could find again.
Yeah. But but then like my experiences after that at least were I kept a lot of closer friends, and my friends from the school I went to in DC, I'm still in touch with a few of those, and although I lost touch with some of them, I sort of got them back again. But yeah, it's interesting. It's always interesting to me to talk to people who've moved around a lot. Also, I really loved it as an experience growing up and found it very rewarding in a lot of ways. I used to make friends really easily, so it didn't bother me. Like I was sad to leave friends behind, but I was always excited to make new friends. If and I still move fairly frequently as an adult, but it is way harder for me to make friends now than it used to be.
It is so much harder.
It takes so much more energy.
Yeah.
But it's always interesting because like my brother, and we had the ostensibly the exact same experience, but he did not enjoy it nearly as much as I did. He always found it a little bit harder to make friends, and he always he just it was more taxing to him, which I only discovered talking to him later as an adult about it. He never made a fuss about it when it was happening, but and it's not like it was hard for him to make friends, but just there's something about it that he just found more taxing at that time. But so I'm always curious. It's cool to hear that your experience was similar to mine. And this is random. So I just picked 2 states that I know you had lived in and were, and that I have also lived in ish. Like Minnesota is more. My dad claimed me as a resident there, so he could claim me on his taxes while he was living there while I was at university. But and so I had a Minnesota driver's license for like 4 or 5 years, even though I wasn't living there at all. But I've been there. I've spent a decent amount of time there, and I now live directly north of there. So I think it's a fun comparison. But Colorado or Minnesota, and why?
Probably Colorado. Now Minnesota, I just lived in a small town, kind of southeast of the Twin Cities. In Colorado, I lived all up and down the Rockies, and I love the mountains. I mean, I still sometimes, I'm in Ohio now, I still sometimes, like, I walk outside and I'm like, where are the mountains? They were my compass point. They gave me direction. They kind of staked down my world. So I miss them a lot. I was very grateful when I was a kid. I lived in Colorado Springs, right up against the Rockies, and then when I went back for school, I was in Boulder, and it was amazing there. So Minnesota's great, but Rockies.
That would be my choice too. I also don't feel like I spend enough time in Minnesota to give it a fair go, but I would also choose Colorado over Winnipeg, which is where I currently live. Manitoba.
To be fair, I did travel up to like Duluth, and you know, the Great Lakes are amazing, but the mosquitoes are killer. So I'm still going with the Rockies.
That's actually the thing I miss most, is being able, like, I love spending all my time outdoors whenever possible. Colorado was perfect for that. So after 4 years of high school in Colorado, like, that was my gold standard for time outside. And we also lived in Arizona for a while, and Arizona was also amazing for, like, we lived in northern Arizona. So well, actually I lived in Phoenix as a kid, but as an adult I lived in northern Arizona. Anyway, and so mountainous and like no biting, well, not to say that there aren't biting insects, but the biting insects you hear in there are scorpions in there, but they sting. That's not a bite. And I've been very lucky though, and I've not yet ever been bitten by a scorpion. I'm very I'm very thorough about checking for them, to the extent that it took me like over a year to stop checking my shoes here in Manitoba after we moved. But yeah, no, just like the lack of mosquitoes here. I love to canoe and stuff, but man, they can be brutal, and and they love me. I don't know if it's my blood type or what, but they will choose me out of most crowds of people. There are some people they love more than me, and it's always nice to hang out with those people because I get fewer bites. But mostly they choose me, and I'm just like, no, I just want to go play outside.
My 8-year-old has that same struggle. When we're out together, she's the one who gets
bitten. Oh man, yeah, dang it. Yeah, but Ohio at least has hills. I actually can't remember if Cincinnati does.
It's very green.
Yeah.
Cincinnati has an amazing amount of trees and natural parks. So it's really a lovely place.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did 1 year of university in Ohio, and in Granville. So yeah, and I remember being very fond of the rolling hills and the trees and stuff. It was nice. But nothing, I miss those mountains. Like, hearing you say that they were your compass, I'm like, yes, like, how do you know which direction is which without the mountains? I need the Rockies. But the funny thing is like, I can go into the mountains and still know which direction is which. It's not like I need them just on the one side. That was like, my husband always teases me about that. He's like, well, it's just because they're in a straight line and you know that way is west. I'm like, no, like, you go into the mountains and I still know which direction is which. But in the plains, I have no idea where anything is. Like, Manitoba's so flat and I have nothing to go by except the sun, and the sun is really low in the sky because we're so far north, and I'm like, I don't know. Anyway, sorry.
The struggle is real.
The struggle is real. Anyway, I guess we could go on to other questions. It has come up more than once because I saw it mentioned as a tag for an interview that you were doing with another author, and also I think it came up during CorinCon, but it has come to my attention that you are a big fan of cookies. What is your favorite kind of cookie?
Oh man. I don't mind getting the reputation as the cookie author.
I think there's nothing wrong with that reputation, let's be honest. That is a good reputation to have. Cookies are delightful. Like, why would you not want to be the cookie?
Right. So I'm really easy to please. I will eat pretty much any kind of cookie you put in front of me, as long as I'm allowed to eat it in terms of diet. But I have a special place in my heart for just a down home homemade chocolate chip cookie that, like, freshly baked, chewy, with the chocolate still a little gooey. Like, life doesn't really get much better than
that. It's true, they are delightful.
So I actually, this past Ramadan, I was fasting and I was doing this Twitter chat with a couple other authors. One of them was Catherine Purdy, and she mentioned a pizookie, and I was like, what is this? And it's a cookie that is baked in a cast iron skillet, so it's like a pizza cookie.
Oh, that's what
that's where it comes from.
I've had those before.
Scoop vanilla ice cream on top, and then you drizzle caramel sauce or fudge or whatever you want to put on top, and then you eat it warm out of the cast iron skillet. And of course, I'm learning about this while I'm fasting.
Oh no.
And I'm like, oh, what heaven is this? So after, or we celebrate the end of Ramadan with Eid, and so the second day of Eid, my kids and I absolutely baked a pizookie, and it was the best thing ever.
Amazing. Perfect.
But I don't have to go decadent to love it. Even if it's just a basic cookie, I will enjoy it.
That's totally fair, yeah. If you're ever in Salt Lake City, there's a place called Ruby Fresh Snap or Ruby Snap. Maybe it's Ruby Snap Fresh Cookies. Anyway, there's a fresh in there somewhere. Yeah. And they're basically like high-end hipster cookies, but they are so good. There's like a $3 per cookie type deal there, but they're so good.
I think there was one called Insomnia Cookies that my kids that I visited in Chicago, and it's like a $3 for a cookie, and you stand there going, do I really want to do this? And the answer is yes.
Yeah. Yep.
The double chocolate mint cookie was to die for.
I believe it. Yeah, and the Ruby Snap place, like they make new recipes constantly, and so they're all named for women, and like some of them, like originally they were like historical, like actresses who were famous for things, or actually and like activists, not just actors, like all kinds of women, but they were, and anyway, I can't remember the exact history. I'm sure I'm butchering that. If anyone is familiar with Ruby Snap and wants to correct me, please do. But they're like they're just amazing. They're like, and I think they have a few that they always keep making, but like they have a range of cookies that they're just like constantly inventing new ones, and they're all delightful and amazing. And some of them are fruit based, and some of them are chocolate based, and some of them are whatever, and they've got frosting, and they've got but they're so good.
One day, my life goals, one day I'm gonna go on a world cookie tour.
Nice. Oh, that is a good call.
Possibly joined with like a book tour, but
there
really
you go. Yeah,
cookies.
This is like the most practical way to do it. Yeah. You might as well. Winnipeg has a really amazing donut shop, and I am a donut person myself. Like I love cookies, but donuts are the dessert that I always want. Like I will turn down most desserts most of the time, not out of any health consciousness, but just because I really can't take that much sugar. And so it has to be really like something that I really, really want for me to say yes to it. But the thing that I will never turn down basically is a donut. and there's a donut
cookie.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And there's a place in Winnipeg that makes gourmet donuts. It's just like those. So they're like $5 donuts, and like they're like ridiculous, but they're so good. It's so worth it.
It keeps you from overdoing things because you cannot excuse buying such expensive.
Exactly.
On a regular basis.
Exactly. I don't, go and get a dozen of those.
Like 5 pounds of organic flour, or it's one like.
Yeah. Yep. But then COVID hit, and I made the mistake of learning how to make donuts myself. And I say a mistake because I made a dozen. Mm-hmm. My daughter, she was 3.5 at the time, and like she ate 1 or 2. I ate pretty much the rest. I think I saved 1 for my husband. And in like a day and a half, and I was like, okay, I can't make these except for like once every few months, because I have no problems with doing that. Like, I don't feel bad about having done that at all. But if I did that every day, it would be problematic, right? So I just, all things in moderation, and I will every now and again make a dozen donuts and eat them.
That sounds pretty amazing. I might have to get that recipe from you.
I will send it to you. They were so good. And it's really not that hard to make. I mean, like if you're used to making bread products and like the various rising stages and stuff, then they're not overly complicated. And they were so tasty. And I just made a lemon glaze to just dip them in, because I wanted it to be delicious but not too fancy.
Yeah. It's amazing.
It was so good.
I do have a soft spot for all things lemon also.
Well, the donut place, if you are ever in Winnipeg, once, travel is allowed again.
I'm putting it on my cookie/donut tour stop.
Yeah, because they make a lemon meringue donut that is amazing. It's probably, I think it's so good that it's not even the first time I've talked about it in the CornCon interviews. Like, it's so good. So yeah, so if you're ever here, we definitely need to go to O'Donuts. That is a good thing for us to do.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. And if I can find a special cookie place here, we will definitely do that too. But to my knowledge, there are a couple places that make really good cookies, but there's not, just like a place that's like, we just make cookies. That's all we do. Which I think there should be. Because I actually have loved the resurgence of like, we are a this one thing shop, because then that thing is so good. They do it so well.
All these cupcakeries, ooh, they're amazing.
Yes. Yeah. That's another solid example. So yeah. Winnipeg also needs a bagel place. We don't have a bagel place, and I think that needs to be fixed.
That's a staple.
Although actually, someone was telling me that one is opening up, maybe so. Or maybe it already did, because I'm behind the times. But okay, so we've talked confectionery, and now let's get down to the slightly less serious business, though, the more serious business of books. And I want to talk about, so I read Thorn. I loved it. There was so much to love about it. First of all, I'd actually never read the Goose Girl. I haven't
Story.
Yeah, well, so I looked it up after I read Thorn, and I'm glad I did, because I enjoyed reading Thorn with the perspective, like I knew it was a fairy tale retelling. I could just tell from the feel of it, but I didn't know what fairy tale it was, and I loved that, because then I was like, everything was new and exciting, and there were no spoilers. And so then I went and looked it up afterwards, and then I was like, oh, okay, yep, that's definitely that's the core of the story. But there's so many things that you did with it that were really lovely, and creative and interesting. And I actually really enjoy fairy tale retellings in general. But I think that the best ones are things that shed light on some interesting themes that may or may not have been present in the original fairy tale. And I think Thorn does that really well. But to start with, I have two questions. We're starting with characterization and then move to to thematics. But Thorn is as a character a total badass in some ways. But she is definitely not what anyone would consider a warrior, and I love that. And I think we don't get enough of that in fantasy, like women who are total ass kickers who are not actually like weapon wielding ass kickers. Like they are ass kickers in other ways. Because I love the idea of strength of character that is strength of character rather than just physical strength. I also have a very weak spot for warriors. I write them all the time, but that doesn't mean that I don't really appreciate seeing all the other ways that women can be strong. So do you have any more characters like Thorn tucked away, and how important to you was Thorn's non-warrior status, etc.? Sorry, that's a couple questions in one. You pick whichever one you want.
But I'll try to do both. Forget one. So I do have more characters tucked away like Thorn. So I'm actually have on my desk the companion. There's actually gonna be a companion duology to Thorn. This is called A Theft of Sunlight, and it's the first in a 2-book companion duology, and it features a different main character. If you read Thorn at the very back, there's a short story called The Bone Knife, and the heroine in that short story is the heroine in this book.
Cool.
And she is another one of these butt-kicking heroines who is not a warrior. Mm-hmm. She doesn't have a secret magical talent. And I say that knowing that I have another series where we have a character, my main character has a secret magical talent. So I'm not dissing that.
No.
But I think it's really important to have characters so my writing byline is that I write mighty girls in diverse worlds. And I think it's really important to have a nuanced understanding of what it is to be a mighty girl. And some mighty girls are absolutely incredibly magical and have these fierce abilities, and some mighty heroines or mighty girls are, you know, ninjas in training, and you know, they will physically go out and kick your butt. But I also think it's really important to recognize that we can be mighty in compassion. We can be mighty in mercy. We can be mighty in who we are at a deep, kind of ethically sound way. And I say that because I also think it's important to have some kind of internal moral compass, right? Because if you want to go out there and be a little, you know, you can say that Voldemort was living his best life, right? You know, he fight a good fight for what he believed in, but that did not make him our hero. No. So I do think that having some sense of a moral compass is really important. But I think it's really, really important in the day and age we live in to have heroines that are strong in who they are, and it doesn't have to be, and it can embrace whatever qualities we've been taught are weak as actually being strengths, right? Because a lot of where I think some of this like butt kicking mightiness comes from is a pushback against patriarchy, right? Where it's understood that women can't do this. And so we're like, no, actually we can, and we can be really awesome at it. And that is true. Yeah. But that is not the only way we can be awesome. Right. And the implication that being kind or considerate or helping others is weak and feminine is something that I think needs to be busted out of the water. That is not acceptable. Those are incredibly strong traits. Yeah. So absolutely, some of my heroines are mighty in those other ways, and I think it's important to model for our young people and for adults too. That you can embrace these qualities about yourself and make positive change in your lives and in those around you, the world around you, without having to turn into a ninja or sorceress. Because frankly, if that's our fix, I'm in trouble. I mean, a lot of us are. Skills in my toolbox. So Theft is about Ray, and Ray is amazing. She is an older sister, and she grew up on a horse ranch. She has a disability. She was born with a clubfoot, and she has never really thought about herself as any kind of a heroine. Like she is just gonna take care of the people around her and do what needs to be done, because you know what, someone's got to do it. And so she's literally the perfect heroine for me, because she's gonna do the job, and she doesn't think she's special. She doesn't necessarily see how amazing she is, but she will put in the hard work to save the people she cares about. And it brings to the fore the reality that saving the world or saving your family or saving the people around you is hard work. Like it's not, you know, a wave of the wand or you know, a hack of the sword and everything's better. No, it is really hard work. So so I really enjoy writing heroines that show those aspects as well. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I really think we need more of those, and I found it very refreshing to read Thorn, largely because of that. And I look forward to reading the companion novels as well, and reading more about Ray, because she sounds awesome too. And I love that stuff. I mostly write actual warriors because that is weirdly closer to my own personal experience. But I also, you know, like Blade's Edge has a warrior character and a healer character, and the healer is not in any way less effective or useful than the warrior character. And in fact, she's the only reason that the warrior character survives, right? Like there's, that's, I feel like that is something we always need to do more of. And I'm always working on ways to put more varieties of strong women into my stories.
And again, I mean, not to say, I mean, I think we really need these stories where we do have the, butt kicking warriors.
Oh yeah.
It's just that, I feel like we need them all.
We need them all. Exactly. No, that's it. That's exactly it. We need all of those stories. And so, yeah, but it's nice to see, it's always nice to see more of this. Like, I feel like we're now getting a lot more of the woman warrior stories, which I love. Mm-hmm. And so it's really nice to see coming up too, more stories of women who are total badasses, but in a different way, it's just like, I love that. So that makes me happy. And thank you for contributing to that. Okay. And
that it's a group effort. So
yeah, right. We can do it together. So another question about Thorn that also I think sounds like based on, I actually read the description for and now like what is the actual title for Ray's story now? The first book?
Theft of Sunlight.
Theft of Sunlight. Okay. Because the short story is like Shadow's Thief or
Bone Knife.
Oh, it's the Bone Knife. Okay. Yeah. Was there one that was called Shadow's Thief?
You're talking about my other series.
Oh, okay, that's a separate. Okay, yeah. I'm like, this is.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is the way my brain mushes things together. You have so many titles, I can't. No, I mean he's not even that. Like, I mean, it's a good number. It was solid backlist, but it's not like it's an insane number to keep track of. My brain is just mush. But Thorn in particular touches on some very timely societal issues. Especially, it was first published was it 2012?
Yes.
Yeah. Are you surprised at how relevant some of the themes around policing, violence against women, and failing systems of government are, particularly in 2020?
I mean, I'm not completely surprised, but I am disappointed.
Yeah.
I would have preferred if I had been happily surprised in a different way.
Right.
And I think that's part of I first drafted Thorn my senior year of college. Mm. So this was 2002. Mm-hmm. 2001 to 2002. So it actually started my first draft probably a week or two before 9/11. Mm-hmm. And it started as like a really cheerful little story. It's like, oh, happy day, here we are. And I realized that that didn't make for good emotional tension. And B, that wasn't accurate to the true story, right? Because in The Goose Girl, you have a girl who like the core story is she loses her place, right? The princess loses her place. She becomes a goose girl. Right. And you have to have like a really good reason why she would accept that. And another really good reason why she would eventually decide to go back and fight for her place. I didn't have either of those in my first draft.
Yeah, I don't know, because she's chill.
It was nice. And then it was like, why is any of this even happening? So it was kind of through my early 20s that I was rewriting Thorn and actually exploring the emotional realities behind the fairy tale, and then my own adaptation of it. And realizing that like, oh, all this stuff about like the goose boy wanting to touch her hair is actually a fairy tale code for assault. Right. Who'd have thunk? Not little me, but now that I'm older, I can figure that out. And so that like all of these issues of violence against women, the failing systems of government are actually built into the original tale if you look at it with different lenses. Right. And I was doing that through my 20s, especially as I was looking at what we were doing as a nation here in the US in terms of international politics, the wars we began because we were angry and looking for justice, and that was actually revenge, you know, because the countries we attacked as a whole had not done anything. They didn't have weapons of mass destruction. They had not planned attacks. Were there terrorist cells who had done things? Yes. Was it the whole country's fault and every person walking down the street? No. But we were reeling from anger and grief, and we lashed out as a nation. And so I was looking at all of this and trying to understand how to break out of these kinds of cycles. And you know, when there is so much hurt on both sides, like, something has to give, and where is it and how does it work? And so I'm not surprised. And, you know, obviously Thorn doesn't mention any of these events in any way. But it is an exploration of justice and mercy and revenge and compassion. And I feel like those are always relevant, because as humanity, we have like no collective memory. We just forget these lessons as soon as we learn them. We go on hurting each other. And so I feel like these are things that we can keep realizing we need to learn over again.
That's those are all solid points. I think it's funny because when I wrote that question, I was specifically thinking of Thorne's interaction with the royal family, with her own family, but also with the royal family that she is sort of paired off to. And then, but I almost forgot about the whole tale of the vengeance cycle with the I want to call her the witch, but that seems like a totally that's a very poor term for her character. But I've forgotten what her actual descriptor is in the Ice Queen.
Referenced either as a sorceress or the lady.
The lady, yes, the lady. And it's just and that actually I think you do incredibly well. I think that's a very poignant moment in the story, which I can't talk about too much without huge spoilers. So that's kind of all I can say. But guys, go read the book. Anyway, I do think that it sounds like you did an excellent job of sort of processing the ways in which it might be possible to move forward from that level of anger and a want for justice that turns out to just be vengeance. And those are really, really solid. Okay, and like the rest is really hard to, there's so many things I want to talk about, but they're all spoilery.
Sorry.
No, that's great. I mean, but how do we? I mean, I don't think it's too spoilery to say that, you know, Thorne runs into some issues with violence, and then in an attempt to seek justice, finds that what version of policing there is in that culture is pretty useless. Which, boy, does that ring true.
I know, right? There's a lot of victim blaming. There's a lot of it's I perhaps when I was writing it didn't fully internalize how real it was. I'm having lived many years as a person of color in the United States, and as a Muslim, I'm well aware of issues like being profiled or, you know, just discrimination. But I still haven't. I've only the beginning of a clue of what it is like to be Black in America, you know. And my concern around, you know, I remember flying after 9/11 and being questioned thoroughly by FBI agents at the departure gate, you know. But that is still nothing like what so many families deal with on a daily basis and have for generations here in the US, you know. So failing systems of government and policing that is, and to be clear, you know, there are wonderful police officers out there, but as an overall system, we have failed.
Yeah.
Our people, you know.
Yep. Yeah, systemic failure, I think, is the biggest issue. Yeah, because we now have such a large body of evidence, and still nothing is being done. And at that point, you're like, well,
yeah, this is structuralized racism. This is systemic injustice. And it is incredibly difficult to fight, but that doesn't mean it's any less important. And, you know,
all the more important to fight it, unfortunately, right?
Well, it's funny because a lot of people read Thorn and they're like, well, I want to know what she's going to do. It stopped too soon. And I was like, she is literally going to spend the rest of her life working on these guys. I am not going to give you the rest of her life in the epilogue.
I actually was tempted. I was curious if, like, before I read the description of the next book, I was like, I wonder if the next book is like, you know, just like a lot of political intrigue as she tries to make inroads, making change, right? Which, now that I know who the actual main character of the next book is, sounds like could maybe be like the background of a part of the background of what's happening. I don't know.
So we opened Theft to Sunlight with Ray being at home, and her best friend's sister is snatched, right? She disappears.
Yeah.
She's stolen. It's a human trafficking situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that sets Ray on the road to visit her cousin in the capital city, who just happens to be married to Noble at court, whom we happen to have met in Thorn. And so Ray ends up within the first few chapters, is really not a spoiler, to Illyra, and Illyra sets her the challenge of figuring out what is happening to the children who are disappearing.
Gotcha.
And this is the whole reason why Ray came to the city. So it's like a perfect you know, confluence of needs and wants. And so yeah, it definitely there are threads left from Thorn that I have no intention of dropping.
Good. Excellent. Yeah, I noticed one other character that's mentioned in the description of the book about Ray that was one of my favorite secondary characters from Thorn, so I'm excited about that too.
Yeah.
I'm assuming, unless I've misremembered his name, but a certain Undercity, bigwig. Okay. So anyway, so that's exciting. And so then, it seems like that's very much going to deal with a lot of similar themes.
In a very different way. I mean, Ray is a very different character from Illyra. Like, she's Illyra comes from this history of abuse, right? And so for her, a lot of her story is learning to stand up for herself and believe in herself and speak out for what she believes in, fight for the people and for herself in a way that she has been taught not to. She's been taught that the way to survive is to be silent. Ray's the complete opposite, right? Like, she has comes from this loving family that has always valued her, and she knows how to protect those around her, and she's always done everything she could. And so when she sets off, she's setting off to save or to stop what she considers to be an atrocity.
Right.
It is an atrocity.
Yeah.
And so her brand of kick buttery very different from Illyra's, but she is so much fun. I really love her. She's got this very dry sense of humor, and she, because she has always kind of given herself a back seat, in a certain sense, she doesn't she doesn't see what she's doing.
Hmm.
And you know, everyone else around her is like, you did what? She's like, yeah. So what's next? Like, you know, you're like, hold on.
It's done, people. Come on, I got things to do. That's great.
Come on, we have slavers to stop. Come on.
Everybody catch up. That's great. That's so cool. Yeah, no, that makes me extra excited for it. And also, we held up the arc there. That looks huge. Which I'm always excited about. I love longer books. Yeah. How many pages is that?
It's ridiculous. It's 512 pages.
Yes.
Apparently, awesome. I'm having a really hard time writing normal size books.
Thorn felt about right for a sort of longer young adult book. How long was Thorn?
Thorn was also long.
Oh, is it also? Okay. Well, this so your pacing's excellent then, because it did not read like a long book at all. So
I'm so glad. Yeah. So Thorn was about 104,000 words as an indie novel.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through multiple rounds of edits with my editors at Harper Teen. I changed editors halfway through, and they both took them through edits.
Mm-hmm.
And so it ended up at 124,000 words, which is pretty honking big for a YA fantasy.
That's true. That's pretty big for YA fantasy, but still not long for a lot of other fantasy. But yes, but for YA. But YA usually clocks in at like 90K, right? So that's a big
90 to 100 is pretty typical. So I'm definitely on the long side, but I'm hoping that it'll be a good enough story that the words will be worth it.
Oh, for sure. I have no doubt. Well, I mean, I would be really, really surprised if it weren't totally worth it. Yeah, but okay, cool. Well, that's awesome. And when is it? That's an arc. When is it out?
It's out in March 21st.
Okay, right.
2021.
Right.
So yeah, they actually haven't shipped yet. I just got my copies, and
nice.
I think the actual e-galleys will drop sometime next month.
Very cool.
So it's coming.
So I can't help but notice that Harper Teen seems to be hiring the cover designer that you initially hired for Thorn to do these, which I love. I totally tried to book her for my next book, but she's booked out until the end of 2021.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I can't book her until 2022. But I was like, put me on your waiting list, because I would have tried to have a project in time for that, because I absolutely love her work so much.
She's amazing. Yeah. So 2022, I better get in touch with her.
Like start booking. I emailed her and she was like, yeah, so I just I set up a newsletter and I was like, I'll do advanced bookings and I'll open my bookings for like 2 weeks, and then I'll probably have a good rough idea of what my scheduling will be like for the year. Just like, nope, just book solid until the end of 2021. It's just like,
oh man,
that is one way to do it.
Yeah.
So,
she's amazing though. I mean,
yeah. Oh, I mean, yeah, it's 100%
still get her. So actually, this is a really cool story. Jenny and I, Jenny's the cover designer.
Yeah.
I was looking for someone to design the cover for Sunbolt, which is my indie series.
Yeah.
And I came across Jenny's book blog, and she had done a series on cover faux pas that was just hilarious. And then she had designed 2 or 3 covers for competitions that were like, ooh, here's this big best-selling series, come up with a alternate cover and post it, and increasing buzz about the story and everything.
Right.
So she'd done a few of those, and I loved her aesthetic. So I actually contacted her and asked her if she would be willing to design a cover for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first cover she had ever done on commission. She had a hopping graphic design career doing wedding cards and invitations and stuff like that.
Okay, that makes sense.
So she did Sunbolt, and we had an amazing time working together, and she kicked off her cover design business from that.
Oh, very cool.
And so my books have grown alongside her, and it's been really amazing.
That's so cool.
It's been a really special relationship.
Oh, amazing. So I realized as I was reading the trad version of Thorn that I had actually purchased and read the original version of Thorn.
Are you serious?
Thanks to Spiffbo, like whenever it was entered in that. Was that in 2018?
No, it would have had to have been before that.
2017? Or even before that?
I sold Thorn in 2017.
Oh, really? So then
something before that.
Huh. Yeah, so it would have been before that. Well, then maybe actually, I think I might have even purchased it just from the links to like previous cover winners. Because was Thorn one of the?
I think it was in a book designer cover thing.
But it might have been. But like, did it not make the Spiffbo cover contest?
I don't recall.
No, maybe not. I would imagine you'd remember
it nowadays.
Mine is too. At any rate, for some reason I had stumbled across it. Maybe I was just looking through previous Spiffbo entries, and that's how I found it. Yeah. Because I was like a finalist last year, and so I actually I was digging through and looking through other Spiffbo entries from previous years. And anyway, and I remember just seeing the cover and loving it in that version, and then buying it. And it was funny as I was reading. Like I remembered the cover from before. I was like, so I know that, but I couldn't remember if I'd read it or not. I was like, I know I bought this. Did I actually read it? Because as I was reading it, like I couldn't remember the beginning. The beginning did not ring any bells. But as soon as she got to the stables, I was like, no, I have definitely read this. Like I remember all of this, like from like the point of her becoming a goose girl onwards. And it's not like the beginning isn't memorable. It is. But it's just like, I don't know what is wrong with my brain, but
interesting. No, that's awesome though.
Yeah.
Very special now.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so I've read it twice. But my brain's such a sieve that I only barely remembered the first time, which was great because it meant I got to enjoy it as if it were a new read the second time.
I've done that with books. I just recently read a book, and of course I'm blanking on the name. And I got to the end and I was like, I've read this ending.
You're like, why?
I'm really glad I read it again because the beginning and the middle were also great.
Right? And you're like, it's nice to remember more of the story. Yep. Yeah. But I don't know about you, but like I read so many books that there are only certain things that are likely to stick out, right? So I guess that's just the way my brain works. And also and it shoves other things out. It's like, none of this is familiar because you need space for these other 100 books.
And then there's times where you're like, am I remembering this? Or is it just that I've read a conglomerate that's kind of like this?
And that was the other question. But I was like, but there's no way I've read another book with the same setup of like found family in a stable and scenes of and them sleeping on the floor next to I just was like, no, I have definitely read this part.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, anyway. So that was fun. But yeah, I love Ginny's stuff. She has been, so basically the main reason that made me think that that cover had at least been a finalist for the cover contest for Spiffbo was that her covers have either won or come in second or third for the last few years in a row, which is awesome. And it just makes sense because her covers are so good.
I'm not surprised. I mean, she's incredible. I'm just grateful that she still makes time for me.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I mean, I still have to book her out like you do.
Well, yeah, let Harpertine know that they need to get on it early.
Yeah, it's funny. I wrote to her and I was like, look, I think they're going to come to you for Theft's cover, and I know I have a cover booked with you, so if you need to use that slot for them, please do.
Totally fair.
Do not say no to them.
Yeah, right. Please take the Harpertine call.
Do.
Yeah. I seriously hope that she starts getting snapped up by trad all the time. If she's not already, I don't know. I have no idea.
She has done a number of covers for Bloomsbury and some other places as well. But yeah, I suspect eventually she'll be doing mostly trad. And
yeah. Oh.
We'll be left to ask her to train apprentices.
Please. She did actually, it's funny because I'm also a cover designer on the side, and part of our email exchange, I was actually asking her about a redesign for a cover that I had designed myself.
Mm-hmm.
And she was really sweet about it, but she actually was like, this cover is actually good enough on its own. She's like, I don't know that I could improve upon it much. And I was like, what? No, there's no way that it's good enough that you couldn't improve upon it. That lies. But there was no reason for her to say that to me. So I have to assume she meant it, because basically she was saying like, you don't have to book me for this.
Really honest.
Yeah, so I would like to think that, but she also was like, but if you have any questions, if there's stuff you want to ask me about after you come up with a draft for the, because and I was also talking about redesigning some of my older covers. She's like, you do the redesigns on those, and if you want to ask me along the way for advice, you can do that. And I was like, so maybe I will be the apprentice.
Yeah, do it, Virginia.
The thing is, I can't, like, she can actually illustrate, and I can just do composites. So I take other people's illustrations that I pay for on stock shops and in stock photos, and then I manipulate them. But she can actually draw. So like, I don't think I will ever catch up to that.
Her illustrated covers are just incredible. Yeah.
So so I can only.
We got our Jenny fangirl.
Hey, okay. So any indie authors watching this, if you are looking for someone and you have a book coming out in 2022, get on Jenny's waitlist. If you have anything coming out this year, so sorry, too sad.
Virginia.
Yeah, call me. Haha. No. I mean, please book me, but I am nowhere close to that level of competence yet. All right, so I guess this is actually the nice seg into the trad indie hybrid state that you are currently inhabiting, and what's different than you expected, what is as you expected, and like different good, different bad, what, how's it going? Because you were indie for 5 years before. 8 years. So yeah, there you go. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I love being indie, and I hope I will always love being indie. It's amazing. You have a lot of control, and I don't say that as a control freak. I say that as a control freak. No,
I say it as a control freak, but that's I don't know.
I'm not that much of a control freak, but I think that as an indie, you can be a lot more nimble. And you can adapt where it is really hard for TradPub to do that. So Thorn released March 24th of this year, right? Which was the week that the United States was going on lockdown.
Right.
Everyone was panic buying toilet paper.
Yeah.
They were not concerned with fairy tales. I mean, I understand. And it has had a really hard time getting traction. And for TradPub, a lot of their sales are print sales. Right. So if all of your bookstores are closed for 6 to 8 weeks, done.
Yeah.
And I went to them and I was like, so bookstores are closed, really need to do an ebook promo. And they were like, not yet. And I was like, I understand, but I don't. No one's buying a $10 ebook.
Yeah.
I mean, some people are, and I'm really, really grateful if anyone watching this is one of
them. I think I actually paid full price for it, but
I have paid once or twice, but it's literally those are the books that like I really want. And in the middle of a pandemic, when you're not sure how secure your job is, a lot of people didn't spend money on things they might normally buy. Right. So it's had a really hard time, and I think had it been an indie release, I mean, I would have dropped the price on that sucker. My goal would have just been reach as many readers as possible, and we'll make up the loss as
on
it gains
research.
traction, right? Like at this point, we want to go for volume over actual money, not dollar return.
Yeah.
That wasn't an argument that I could really make with Harper. And they have their own business model, and it's, they know what they are doing, but most
normally, but not maybe during a pandemic.
in a brick and mortar setting, right?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that has been challenging. And I do think they have been, like, they did eventually come around doing a price promo with Thorn. It definitely helped.
Yeah.
There's going to be things that, like, we just can't get around. Like, we lost out on the first months of bookshelf space for Thorn. Yeah. We're never going to get it back. You know, like, that's how the book industry works.
Yeah.
So that has been really educational for me. You know, as an indie, like, you also feel like your books are pretty evergreen. Like, if you need to relaunch them, you can. If you want to put new covers on them, you can. If you want to try, like, advertising the heck out of them at a price promo point for 2 months, you can.
Yeah.
With Trad Pub, it's up to the marketing team, and they have 200 other books that they're working on. So unless you're a frontline author, which, like, all but 5 of us are not, you know, like, you don't get that focus that would help you to get going. So that has definitely been educational. On the flip side, it has been amazing to hear about and see my book getting into libraries. That has been really, really special because I grew up getting most of my books from the library.
Yeah.
Again, it was, you know, the who pays $10 for an ebook? I sure couldn't growing up. Like, as a young adult, there was no way I could drop $10 on an ebook.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't have ebooks, but, like, even the physical books I bought.
But theoretically,
I thought really carefully, like, the physical books I bought were books that I had read 3 times or more and loved, and I needed on my shelf, you know? Right. So part of going traditional for me was just to be able to reach readers in libraries, who you know, who needed my book for whatever reason. So that has been really special, and
that's great.
Hopefully that will continue.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I feel like there's, like, normally, and actually everybody I've talked to, almost everybody I've talked to, well, no, yeah, like all the authors I've talked to who have switched from indie to trad, have had, unfortunately, trad launches during COVID. So like, the question I want to ask is, like, you know, how does it feel launching a book trad? And they're like, well, don't really know, because COVID. And you're like, oh, right, that is such a bummer. Because normally, with an indie launch, you'd be like, COVID schmovid, then you just, you know, push through and
I have to be grateful that, like, I did have an indie career behind me, so I could be like, oh, I'm not doing a physical book launch. It was going to be my first, you know, book launch party at a bookstore. I was like, all right, we're not doing that, but I do still know how to, like, party online, so this is okay. Like, you know.
So online party. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, it seems like you've leveraged blog tours and online events quite successfully.
I tried,
over your career, which is awesome. It is, I think, a thing that takes a sort of special talent to do well, which is to say, to do, you know, in a way that gets you more than just, like, a sort of flash in the pan type of response. I know, like, I only ever paid for one blog tour, and it felt a little bit fizzly, but that's probably because I didn't stack it with anything. You're like, I didn't do all the things that you need to do to make it work, right? And that's because I didn't know that you needed to do those things.
And I'm also learning that, like, I think that blog tours where you don't know the bloggers are not going to return as much for you as ones where you do. Now, it's obviously really hard starting out to know bloggers. So a lot of what I did earlier on in my career was, you know, I would hire a blog tour operator. Yeah. And then when it was done, I would just ask them to share with all the bloggers who did reviews that I had an early reviewer list. And if they ever wanted to read another book from me as an ARC, that they could sign on to it, and I would only email them when I had
another
a new book.
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening is over time, I built up this list of bloggers who had read previous books by me and were interested in sharing future books. And that's where you get like a personal touch.
Right.
They actually care. There are bloggers who are interacting with other bloggers. They're part of a community. Because there's a lot of like, I mean, I don't want to be mean, but a lot of spam book sites out there where people, I mean, these are real people and they love books.
Right.
But they're not really part of a community. They're just throwing up announcements every day. And it's that flash in the pan kind of thing. Like you might have a little bit of impact maybe, but it's not a personal discussion. They're not, you know, and so if you're going for that kind of thing, then it does take, it takes time to kind of work up those connections.
Yeah. I actually pretty much like, there was basically there were 2 reviewers off of that blog tour of like, I can't remember how many I did. It was more than 10, but I can't remember if it was 15 or 20. Who like I felt like would probably want to read something else by me later, you know. But so like that didn't really turn into anything for me. And it wasn't until Spiffbo that I first actually encountered a blogging community that was excited about my stuff, and then that I felt like would be interested in actually, you know, mentioning my stuff later if I, you know, like the next time
people who are like-minded readers and
and just like, and people who actually like, it became a thing about community. So it was like that year-long competition. I mean, I made 9 amazing author friends with the other finalists, which was like, that was a lucky find that I don't think even necessarily normally happens during Spiffbo. It was a, you know, sort of a very just pure luck of the draw. But the whole blogging community, everybody in the Spiffbo community sort of became, at the very least, acquaintances, and a lot of them friends, and just like, and now I feel like there's actually a large community of bloggers who would express interest in me in a book of mine in the future, you know, which is really exciting. I'm actually really excited for the next book I launch, just both because I am excited about the book, but also because I'm like, this may be the first book that actually like will have some amount of buzz about it before it launches, because I have been so terrible at that. And so it's like, oh, how exciting to actually get that going. So it's so cool to me that you sort of like single-handedly just did the legwork to develop that. Because I just like luckily stumbled into it after failing miserably at it for a long time. And you actually like systematically built it in a really effective way. And that's like amazing.
3 years to figure out that I should do that, right? Because I've been going since 2012. So
yeah.
I don't need credit for any intelligence here. I mean, I've had 8 years to get to the point of going, oh, I should collect names.
But you did it. Like I had 5 years to just like luckily stumble into a community. So trip blindly or at least process it out. Anyway, I think I love that you actually did it consciously, and that it seems to have really worked for you. You have a lot of not just reviews, but really positive reviews for all of your books on Goodreads and on Amazon. And that's amazing. And your sales ranks seem to reflect that. And that's it's like, I mean, congrats. It's gotta be like, that's the dream, right? You get that consistent. So I'm excited for you. Do you have more indie launches coming?
I am working on the next Sunbolt book.
Okay.
It has been really ornery. So this is like the 4th time I've tried to get this draft.
Oh man.
Fixed. And I am now at the stage, I kid you not, Virginia, I am introducing a bouncy baby goat.
Yes. Awesome.
It's happening because
did you start with I kid you not in reference to a bouncing baby goat?
God. No.
Yes, unintentional puns. Oh, you kid me, yes.
There is a lot of kidding involved.
So much kidding.
Yeah, those books, part of why I really struggled with it is it was really grim. You know,
you didn't know that it needed a bouncing baby goat.
Yeah, I mean, the first first book, like they're very fast-paced adventure kind of stories. And the third book is slightly less fast-paced, and so it just got really grim because there's a lot of sorrow that my main character is dealing with, and she feels very disconnected, and she has just lost a lot of how she identified herself. And so learning to reinvent yourself is not an easy process, and so it was just a miserable read.
Oh no.
And I had this one character that I was like, he's going to be my comic relief character. He walked onto the page and he was such a jerk, Virginia.
Oh no.
So I realized before I started this rewrite, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to have to smack him upside the head, and he's going to have to be nice. Like, I don't care. And then I was like, and that's not even enough. He's getting a bouncy baby goat that follows him everywhere. And so, yes, we are pulling out all the stops to fix this story.
You got to do it. You got to do it. Hey, I cannot fault you at all. I put a talking wolf spirit trapped in a katana into my latest work in progress because sometimes.
When does it come out?
This is I'm shooting for February 2021 with arcs coming out in January. So.
Oh, exciting. Okay. Well, let me know because I want to read that.
Okay, all right. I will keep you posted. Yeah, it's
a sassy wolf spirit.
Oh, very, 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 very. They are super snarky.
That's what we need.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they're millennia old, and they are a wolf spirit, and so they aren't super interested in humans' foibles, right? But and they've been trapped in a freaking sword for like a really long time. Yeah, so there's a sort of constant balance between the fact that the wolf spirit finds itself kind of caring about the main character initially just for its own purposes, and then eventually because they are like, oh, you're actually a good person. You're actually, yeah. I didn't think they were good humans, but you're not bad. Fine. Yeah. So anyway, it's it's but I'm having to, even that wasn't enough because like all my Gensoka books tend to be pretty dark because the whole structure of the first book was this fight against a government that was basically just rooted in misogyny, based on my own devising. But that was the original story. And now this third book follows a new set of characters, but they've moved. There's been a huge amount of progress made after the first two books, but there's still a lot of problems and a lot of as with any deeply rooted long time regime being overthrown, there's a ton of work that has to happen to make things actually better, right? And so these characters are still dealing with that, and there's a lot of darkness around them, and there's a lot of personal darkness in this one character's life. And then so
too.
Yeah, exactly. Like I needed baby goats, and instead I went with talking wolf spirit trapped in a katana, as you do. But now I'm like, okay, but also there was already a bunch of stuff that was going to be happening on boats in this story, on ships in the ocean, or some of it, like it's very relevant to a big plot point, but there wasn't quite as much time on ships as I necessarily wanted. And then I read R.J. Barker's The Bone Ships, and I was like, okay, we are having more whimsical and yet also somehow slightly naval ship interactions here. Gosh darn it, this is happening. So
I'll have to look that up.
It's oh yeah, you should. The Bone Ships is amazing. It's like if you took the Master and Commander series but made it fantasy and a way cooler like societal setup, cooler and also well, yeah, no, actually equally messed up, because it's not like the British Navy was like a good system. But so like equally messed up, but in a slightly different way. But yeah, just like it's just really good. It's so good. I can't. Yeah, I'm really excited about that. I don't know if you've ever read. Do you ever read British naval stuff, like any of the Master and Commander stuff?
I
Books
haven't read the Master and Commander because I like magic.
Yeah, that's fair. Have you read the Naomi Novik Temeraire series? Which is
I haven't. It's on my to read. I read her Spinning Silver just recently and loved it. No, sorry, I read Uprooted. Sorry,
okay.
And Spinning Silver is like right there waiting for me.
Both of those are amazing. Spinning Silver is even better. Yeah.
But yeah, I have heard a lot about the Temeraire series. I didn't pull that. Honestly, I have not been able to read as much as I used to in the last year or so. Yeah. It's really dropped off. And I think part of it, we're talking about the difference between indie and trad pub. The difference as a writer with trad pub is they're like these deadlines that just come out of nowhere. Like you're happily going along working on a project, and then this email shows up. And it's not when your editor even said it would show up. And they're like, great, we need edits back in 4 weeks or in 11 days. And you're like, oh,
I guess I'll put this down. Yeah.
And do it. And so I did a lot of dropping everything and do it. And it was very good for me in a certain sense, because deadlines light a fire that I can't light myself. But yeah, so I did a lot less reading because I was just manically writing.
Right. Yeah. That's totally understandable. Yeah, I found I'd do that to myself basically towards the end of any deadline that I've given myself, like the last 2 months before I release a book. I generally am not reading because I'm spending every waking moment trying to make the book ready. Yeah. So yeah, so I'd imagine you would just do that, but on somebody else's schedule.
That just makes it a little more challenging, especially when you're like deep in a different book world, and then all of a sudden, like I was deep in working on my baby goat character, and all of a sudden, like I got the here's the final proofread pass for
like quick
staff to do this now. We got 11 days. Is that gonna work? And I'm like, yeah, it's gonna work. The story again.
Right. How many baby goats are in this one? Wait, 0? What was I even thinking?
How does my character speak again?
Right.
Yeah. A different voice in my head.
Yeah. That's hard.
But it's good. Yeah. It challenges me in different ways, and challenges are generally good, except when your life is on the line, which my life is not. So we're good.
Yay. Excellent. My next question is about BookBub. We just talked about how you have leveraged like blog tours and reviews and reviewers. And I say leverage, it makes it sound so mercenary. That's not what I mean. But you've made good use of services that people offer. And BookBub featured deals specifically for anyone watching at home who may not be familiar with what BookBub is or what getting a BookBub means. It is one of the gold standards in indie pub to snag a BookBub. I was always surprised to learn that it's actually it's a kind of a gold standard in trad as well. Like there's not. It's actually really hard to get a BookBub featured deal, no matter who's publishing your book. And I know firsthand how effective they can be as a sales tool. Again, we run into me as a newbie author back when I'd been doing this for 2 years when I got my own first and only BookBub featured deal, and the BookBub itself went really well, but I did not leverage it as I should have, and really failed to make the long tail work for me.
That's hard.
Yeah, and it was a combination of poor planning and terrible internal second guessing. I basically talked myself out of running additional ads along with the BookBub because I was so concerned about the outlay of money. And
Well, it's really hard. I mean, so
yeah,
for folks who are not authors, you know, it's BookBub's a newsletter service. They'll send you curated selections of books that are deals
yeah,
in your genre of choice.
ebook
So it's
specifically.
really hard to get them to select your book because
Mhm.
they're going to check and see not only is it up to their standards, but have they sent anything out similar to it? You know, like a whole range of like what are their readers really interested in right now? What are they getting clicks on? Like, so there's a whole range of things that help decide that. So getting that deal is one thing, but then um, it boosts your sales rankings on retailers like Amazon, and Amazon has gotten to the point where they're like, oh, you shot up so high, we're going to let you fall back down again because that was a fluke. And so the only way you can get the algorithms to continue to show your book to new readers is to what's called stack ads, where
Yeah.
you're putting smaller ads at smaller promotion services kind of before and after BookBub to keep your sales kind of higher elevated than you started out, so that it'll plateau at a higher sales rate, and you'll end up reaching more readers than you started out with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks to Amazon's sweet, sweet algorithms.
I
But yeah, but you have to essentially, and then, you know, the old adage, you have to spend money to make money.
Yeah, I think that BookBub is so expensive. I think
Yeah,
that's where I started out with, that it's really hard to be like, all right, I'm going to put out hundreds of dollars on this and then additional hundreds of dollars on smaller ads.
right.
Like, am I just gonna
Like lose it all. Yeah.
lose it all?
Yeah. Is anyone even going to buy the book? Plus,
Which,
and you're selling at 99 cents usually, like it doesn't have to be
yeah,
that price point, but that is frequently the price point that people choose.
yeah.
And so then, yeah, like, are you like, how, like, are you really going to make back that money? Because yeah, it's hard to convince yourself that you're going to. Generally, the answer has been historically, yes. You are at least in the end going to make back that money. Even if you don't make it all back in the first couple days, though many people do.
Yeah, the,
Yeah, and so like I did make back the money that I did spend, and I stacked with a couple other ad services like Fussy Librarian and a few other things, but I should have. I turned off all my Amazon ads because I was like, Amazon's. I mean, I don't know. I don't even know what I was thinking. I was just like, I don't want to give Amazon extra money when I'm already spending all this money. It was just nonsensical. But I freaked. I basically just panicked and did stupid things. And so and so the end result was I had this great small spike, and a tail that lasted 2 or 3 weeks, but that's it. And really, I learned after the fact. Well, I actually even learned beforehand. But you can make way more out of that. And which you have done multiple times. So let's talk about that, because that's what we're not here to examine my follies so much as talk about your successes. And you were so successful with BookBub that BookBub actually wrote an article about your transition to trad
well,
because it was actually a part of that story.
yeah, I mean,
So
my BookBub back. So I published Thorn as an indie, as we mentioned,
mm,
and I ran a BookBub deal on it, and um, an agent by the name of Manuel Morgan checked her BookBub deals that day and picked up Thorn and read it, and she reached out to me, and she was like, I know you're a happily published indie author, but have you ever considered Trad Pub? And if so, I'd like to chat with you. And I was like, oh, yes. I'd actually spent a couple of years shopping Thorn around to agents
oh, really?
before I published it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really kind of wild. So, and then Emmanuel, we had a long, extended discussion over the course of a few weeks about Trad Pub before I signed with her, and then she was having lunch with an editor from Herpertine, and they were just catching up before they got started talking about the authors they were actually there to meet about. And you know, Emmanuel shared that she had just signed with me and was really excited to see what I was bringing her. That she didn't know what I was going to bring her, but had read Thorn and
Mm.
just loved it, and was just excited. So
Yeah.
this editor went home, bought Thorn for herself, read it and reached out to Emmanuel and was like, I want this book. I mean, these kinds of deals, they don't happen. They're literally fairy tales. Like, like this is the exception that proves that like the rule, like it's so way out there.
Yeah.
And so when we Publishers Weekly shared that like this is how the deal happened, BookBub was like, whoa, this is super cool. So they interviewed us and just because it was so cool that it all came together actually through BookBub, you know. So that's where that article came from, was just the confluence of all these kind of almost impossible coincidences.
Totally cool. And in the meantime, you had multiple featured deals, or you've had multiple featured deals in your time as an indie. And have all of them gone the same? Was there a learning curve? Did you make mistakes like me when you started, or did you always, like, you've done enough research, you did it right the first time? Or
I mean, the first time was like in, I don't know, 2013 or something, and BookBub was new and everything was new and no one knew what they were doing. Everyone was just like, yay. I mean, the algorithms on Amazon didn't know what they were doing.
Right, yeah.
They rewarded you for BookBub, so you didn't need to stack anything, right?
Right.
So definitely, like, as the publishing landscape, the indie publishing landscape has changed, and as retailers have become more nuanced around, you know, how they understand selling trends, things have changed, and I've definitely had a series of learning curves. Yeah, you know, I've discovered now that the other promotional sources that I've used before just don't give me the return that I used to get. And the like new thing that's working better for me is newsletter swaps with authors who can personally recommend the books they've read. So and that makes perfect sense, but it's just now we're at a point now where people actually have extensive newsletters, whereas 5 years ago no one did.
Right. That's a good point.
So it's everything's changing, but now if I were to try and do promos, it's about you know, talking to authors and swapping books to spotlight that we both love from each other's repertoire.
Nice.
To try and help drive sales and you know, cross-pollinate readers, as I like to say.
Solid. That's cool. Yeah, I do think that newsletters are very useful. I feel like that's the thing I've fallen behind on most with COVID and everything else about 2020 being so ridiculous, is like, I don't have the energy for newsletters anymore. I have such a hard time getting my newsletter written each month.
I mean, a lot of my newsletters since COVID came have been like our adventures in quarantine, which we've had.
Made sourdough today.
Yeah, let's see. May's was all about, or no, June was about our basement flooding.
Oh no.
And July was about the mouse that decided to move into our house. So
cool.
Whom I was able to catch and release, and he was given a name by my daughter. His name was actually Friendly.
Amazing.
So, you know, I mean, like, it's really hard right now, but I think that, you know, as much as we are burnt out as authors, I think readers are also looking for personal connection. So
yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, I was just like, yes, I can talk about my writing, but frankly, it's not going anywhere right now. So let's just talk about life. And I mean, these have been the most comic newsletters I have ever written. You know, like, what do you do when Friendly the mouse moves into your house? Like, you know?
Did you give him a cookie?
I didn't. I missed that. I missed that literary illusion. I should have. I did give him a new home at a park about 2 miles away, and I gave him oatmeal, which he completely ignored.
Oh.
So, you know, if it had been a cookie, he might have gone for it.
You should have named him Picky. Picky eater. Finicky.
In my house, those are discerning eaters.
Fair.
You know?
The discerning mouse. No, I want Gouda, woman. I do not want oatmeal. You can keep your oatmeal.
Cooked oatmeal.
Ugh,
Oh goodness.
that's funny.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think part of the reason I delayed, like my last newsletter was basically talking about my parents' death. And so I think it took me a particularly long time to write because it was not an easy topic. And it's not even like I went in depth about it, but it was just like, how do I announce to a bunch of people that like, hey, sorry, I haven't really been around. Here's why. But yeah, anyway, so it's just been
as it is, it's also real and it's
yeah.
important, you know, and I think it's also especially important right now for us to share that grief is real and many of us are experiencing it. You know, my uncle passed away from COVID at the end of June.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And you know, I think it's important to, as much as it is important for us to kind of learn how to share these things, it's important for, you know, readers out there to see their own realities reflected back to them, you know, and to know they're not alone, to know that like, I mean, everything is not hunky-dory, you know, and we know it, and we all are feeling it, and and we're there with them, you know, that you're not alone. I think those are really important messages.
That's a good point. And it also, like, I think as a society, we don't talk about death as much as we should, or in the ways that we should, you know, like we make it this weird, incredibly tragic thing. Not to say that it's not tragic, it often is, but it is literally a thing that we're all going to do. Right? It is
the definition of being like alive, right?
Yeah.
We're all going to die.
Yeah. And I don't think we accept that on a level, maybe just like a healthy enough level, you know, like it's we sort of mystify it and we make it seem really scary, and I mean, yeah, like there's the potential for it to be scary and awful, but it's like, but as a thing that's literally going to happen to everybody at some point, it feels like something we should just talk about more. And also about losing our parents, because that's also a thing that the majority of us will experience, right? Like most of us will survive our parents. And so like you almost feel like there should be a class. I have a friend who's like, there should be a class for this kind of stuff, for this sort of like you become
there are, but you have to go looking for them. It's
well, right. I mean, yeah, it's not like
with all the rest of the high school with all the other classes.
Yeah. I feel like it should be something that we talk about more as a society. Just like, yeah, this stuff happens and it's rough, but like, yeah, we don't talk about grief enough to make it really clear that everyone grieves differently, that there is no set of experiences that everyone will have, but that there are these common things that you might expect and that might sneak up on you at weird times. And like, there's just so much about it that, you know, I think anybody who is regularly going to therapy or counseling, et cetera, may get a chance to talk about, especially if they're doing it for something related to grief, but that otherwise a lot of us as humans don't really talk about. And it's which is too bad, right? Because like I think the best way to be a friend to someone who's grieving is to just be there for them when they need you, and know that that's not all the time, but that it may go in phases of like this week I need you every day, or you know, like, but or maybe like I don't really need you except for like these 5 minutes, or there's no prescribed way to do it, but just to sort of be there, be available, and know that you can't fix it and it doesn't need to be fixed is another thing. Like that it's grief, and it's a thing that's just going to stick around on some level forever, and that's okay. That's just like, that's part of it, right?
You have to learn to accept it. Yeah. One of the things that really disturbed me, and and it was more of a trend a few years ago, but you still see it now, is this whole like idea of cheating death, right? Where, you know, they're gonna die, but then instead they turn into like a demigod or something. You know, and it is so harmful. It is so harmful because you have this moment where you can have young people understand that death is real and it happens to all of us, and you cannot fight death. You can fight dying. You can fight dying, but you cannot fight death. Right. And so actually in Thorn, you know, there are some character deaths. And I had my father say to me at one point, well, you're rewriting it. Can you bring them back? Can they not die? You know what? You're in book 2. Could they come back? And I'm like, no. Like, they're dead.
And humans die.
They die and they're dead. And it sucks. And there's reality.
Yeah.
Because and I don't say that, I mean, like, that's not the evil author laugh. That's the reality of, like, if you don't even see this in books,
right,
and you don't have anyone around you die until you are in your 20s, it is devastating.
Yeah.
You don't know how to grieve. You don't know what death looks like. You don't understand these emotions that are literally ripping you apart. It can destroy your life. And at the back of it, you're going, but they were supposed to live.
Right.
They're going to show up again, because that's what happens in the books I read.
Right.
You know? So, yeah, I'm very obviously
upset about that.
Passionate about the fact that if we're going to have someone die, they're going to die.
Yeah.
And if we're going to, you know, like,
I do kind of like the versions of bringing someone back where it's like, but it's awful. Where it's like, you know, it's like, oh yeah, no, look, I can save this person. I can keep them alive. And you're like, yes, anything, please keep them alive. And then it's like, and now they're a demon, you know, or like whatever. They're just like they're a zombie. They're whatever.
We have to save the world from what we just did.
Right, exactly. Like, it's where the consequences of cheating death are horrible, right? Or even just people who can live forever and that existence being problematic. Right. Like I do actually enjoy those questions, and I do like that sort of the cost of cheating death idea.
I just beta read this past spring, so I guess it's been a little while, winter, a really interesting story in which an immortal creature was basically looking for the key that would allow them to die. And that's what the story is about, right?
There you go.
And it's told from the perspective of someone who ends up helping them achieve that. And so for that person, it's very cathartic, right? I mean, it's like there's this intense level of grief also, because there is this amazing person who's been around like 1,000 years, and all I want to do is die. And you're like, but I want you to live. And then you're like, that's
selfish.
I really have to understand that actually this is unnatural.
Right.
And you're right to want your death. You know, so it was a really fascinating read. It asked some really hard questions, and I'm all behind it, right? Because this is, like you said, this is the consequences of cheating death. It's like, you're tired. Everyone you love has died. And anytime you meet someone, they're going to die, and you're going to keep going. You know, and you're done. You've seen enough evil in the world, you're done.
Right. Yeah. Plenty of people see enough in a single lifetime. You then compound that, multiply that. Yeah. There are a couple of urban fantasy series that I really like that have vampires in them, and the vampires are more or less immortal.
Yep.
And I really like the versions of vampirism that have it so that vampires are all ranges of good and evil, right? They're just as varied as people are, because they were people and they got turned into vampires, and so they're just as good or bad as humans. However, as they get older and older and older, they live for centuries and centuries and centuries, and they can be killed, so they're not totally immortal, right? Like, but if they're not killed, they'll live forever. So if they're not violently eradicated, they will live forever. And as they get older and older and older, they go a little insane and sometimes in ways that are just sort of like, he's just eccentric, and some ways are like, oh no, she wants to just like wipe out the entire world, because the idea of just being like, the dissociation from humanity, right? Like the longer they remain vampires, the more they become something that's not at all human, and they are become very separated from human morality. And then they you know, can either turn into weird, crazy savior complex people, or people who just want to like wipe out humanity, or, you know, like, and there's a range, and there's still a range even in the ways that they lose it, right? But it's just, I like that. It's like, that's a nice amount of complexity and moral interest, right? You're like, yeah, that's right. And those are all affected by the events that that particular character has witnessed, and the various people they've lost, and the whatever, and like how, and whether or not they have anybody that they actually care about in their vampire family, right? Like that keeps them feeling like life is still worthwhile, etc. And so you get just this range. And that's cool. I like that. I'm like, if you're going to explore immortality like that, I like it being more nuanced and complex than just like, yeah, they're all terrible, or they're all great, they just live forever, and they just like learn a bunch of music and study, you know, like some people might do that, but not everybody. Like that. Like I would do that. I would learn to play a bunch of instruments and read a whole bunch of books. I would finally read all the books
and write them.
Yes.
So
yeah.
projects. Oh my gosh.
Think of how many pen names you'd have to go through as an immortal author.
The logistics.
They hard. Starting over each time. I mean, you could just explore every genre and like
work your way through.
Yeah, spend like 50 years in each genre, and then cycle back when the old genres become interesting again. Whatever. Anyway, it's kind of fun. Okay, well, I think we are getting pretty close to a reasonable time limit here. It's we've been talking for basically an hour and 45 minutes, which is awesome. I'm so bad at keeping these things short. It's insane. I'm like, I'm gonna do it 90 minutes this time. 90 minutes. But no, it's always like, I'm lucky if we stop at like right before the 2-hour mark. So, so I think we actually have already covered. Well, actually, yeah. So we're down to our 2 really, really important questions.
Hit me up. I'm ready.
The first of which is tea or coffee.
Neither.
Okay, no caffeine at all, or just a different form of it?
I tend to have to go light on caffeine because I'm super sensitive to it. So if I have a single, this is heartbreaking. If I have a single square of dark chocolate, after about 5 o'clock at night, I will be up past midnight. So I used to have like a square or 2 of dark chocolate when my kids went to bed right around 8 o'clock, and that would like power me up to do my writing. And then I was like, why am I not falling asleep until 3 a.m.?
Oh man.
So I in the winter I will have spicy hot chocolate that I mix it myself. I put ginger and nutmeg and cinnamon and hot pepper.
That sounds amazing.
Cocoa and a little tiny dash of vanilla. And I make it so traditional hot chocolate is 1 part chocolate, 2 parts sugar, sometimes 3 parts sugar. I do 1 to 1. Okay. So it's a really kind of stronger chocolate. It's got a slight bitter edge, which I love.
Nice.
Even though it's obviously made with milk, it's still got that like dark chocolate touch to it.
Sure.
So yeah, I'll do spicy hot chocolate.
That sounds really good.
I will drink tea socially. Like if all my friends are getting together around a little, pot of tea, I will have a cup of tea. But it's really just to be part of that social moment. I'm not going to go make myself a cup of tea.
Totally fair. I mean, yeah, if the amount of caffeine in a piece of dark chocolate will keep you awake, I can't imagine what a cup of tea would do to you. So I don't blame you.
Tea is like 3 o'clock.
Yeah, well, my cutoff for caffeine in general is 3 o'clock. Although actually, I consume enough caffeine that I can still have tea or black tea in the evenings and generally be okay. But I cannot have a cup of coffee after 3 o'clock, or I will be awake until 6 a.m.
Yeah.
I generally stay up until 2 a.m. anyway. Like that's my normal bedtime. but I will be up until 6 if I have coffee later.
Yeah, that's rough.
Okay, but spicy hot chocolate sounds amazing. I am gonna have to try that. Yeah, I'm down with that. Okay, and my final very important question is, if you could be any fantasy animal companion, what would you be and why?
Oh, that's a good one.
Right.
So I don't know. I feel like it's a toss up between like a dragon and a hippogriff.
Oh, nice, nice.
Yeah, I mean, either of those are pretty. I like the flight. I like the flight thing. Um, and a little bit of magic. That's nice. Most, they're usually a little bit magical. So, I think hippogriffs can have smaller homes, and it's easier housekeeping.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
And they don't necessarily have to be in caves. I like light, so like
they can roost. They can roost in a tree.
Nest up on a cliffside.
Oh,
I'm not really big on heights, but I think the hippogriff nature would help me conquer that.
If certainly, like, if falling off a cliff just meant you were gonna fly away, I think you'd be way less freaked out, right? Like, she's like, okay,
I'd get over it.
That is, solid. I like it. That's a good answer.
What about you?
Oh man. I mean, because it's animal companion.
Yeah.
I don't want to say dragon because I feel like a dragon would just burn people who tried to.
These like dragon rider kind of things.
That's true. No, there definitely are those worlds.
Riders, so I may actually be out of a choice there.
But I feel like, well, no, there are hippogriff riders, I think.
Are there?
Yeah. Well, in World of Warcraft, you can definitely ride a hippogriff. There are griffin riders.
There we go.
Which close enough, right? You're just switching up animal body parts, but it's the same general concept. Yeah, I don't like, maybe like a phoenix. I don't know if that would be a companion animal either, though. You just show up and
show up
and just incinerate stuff. I'd probably want to be like a magical hedgehog that could talk.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I actually wrote a book, one of my earliest novels, which is actually only part of a book because it was before I started finishing novels. This was I think I started it maybe my sophomore year of college.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a book about a young woman whose friend gets turned into a hedgehog. And he can talk, but only to her. And and then she has to, like, she basically goes on a quest to, like, get him turned back into her friend, the human. And then it turns into this, like, giant epic thing because it turns out that the person who turned him into a hedgehog is actually an evil wizard. The problem I ran into, as you might predict, is like, why? Why did he bother turning this young gentleman into a hedgehog?
Been in a bad mood, didn't have his coffee that morning, got ticked off, and was like, "You're a hedgehog, moving on." And it's just like collateral damage,
I think I came up with some reason for it, but I can't remember what that was, and I don't think it was good enough. I kind of want to revisit that story.
I actually have a story that I want to revisit that is kind of similar, which is that there's a girl and she finds a goat.
You like the goats.
Goats.
Goats are fun.
Is being chased by dogs through the woods, which is a very odd kind of situation. Goats don't live in woods, and dogs belong to like the local duke, and this is all really weird. And so she rescues the goat, and it's a really odd goat, and so she figures out it's actually like a cursed person who ticked off the princess, and so the princess turned him into a goat, and so
as you do.
This was, I wrote the rough draft in response to a prompt that was like, the goal of your story is to lock the princess in a tower.
Okay.
And I was like, well, she's a villain.
There you go.
Really.
She's just willy-nilly turning people into goats.
I know. And, so my heroine is also trying to figure out how to help this goat revert to his original form, but then she realizes who he is, and I was like, well, I don't really want him to be human again, because then we can't be friends.
Oh no.
And also finds out that the way to break the curse is literally someone has to sacrifice themselves for him, right? So like, then she would be dead.
Right.
So it's a really fun book. I really need to revisit it, because there's a lot of random stuff. Yeah. It's one of those books that like your hedgehog book, like you wrote it without an audience necessarily in mind, and so you have the freedom to just do random things because it does this work. And there's definitely like some things like you have where it's like, well, what was the actual motivation? You know, I have the motivation in this part, partly because, you know, yeah, but there's other holes that are like, so. And thankfully I do have a, well, I really think it's important that people face death and characters die. I don't kill main characters, right? I'm not going to kill my viewpoint character.
I think that's fair.
So,
I understand why some people do it, but I appreciate when people don't also. Yeah.
Come up with a solution for saving the goat that involved sacrifice that somehow did not require like actual death in the sacrifice. So it was a trick.
Gotcha.
There was dragon involved. It's a lot of fun. I really need to go back to the story.
Nice. That does sound fun. I would read that.
So, you know, and I'm realizing now I've written dragons and I've written phoenix, so maybe I need to go more of that way for the dragon companion option. I mean the animal companion option. Yeah.
Next up is hippogriffs.
Yeah, I mean dragons are kind of like top of the line, because it takes, you know, they're the top of the food chain.
Yeah.
And you know, anyone ticks them off, they'll just, you know, poof, you're gone. You know,
yeah.
You kind of have to watch your temper. That might be a problem with me.
That's the thing. I feel like I would smack talk a dragon and be incinerated. Not out of like malice, but just because, you know, that's how I interact with my friends. I'd be like, hey, dragon, you know, and then make some joke, and dragon would be in a bad mood and just burn me. Fair. Harsh but fair, as I like lie there charred. I'm now entirely burned.
The animals running around.
Yeah, but all right. Well, that's that. I think that covers our most important questions, and we have now been talking for 2 hours almost exactly. So I'm gonna call it, just because I feel like I love these, and I love when they go long, and then I'm like, how many of our audience members am I basically telling, like, you have to sit down for a feature-length film to enjoy this and make sure you don't miss anything? But I feel like they're worth it. But you know, it's probably, if I were a marketing person, I would probably be like, you have to cut these down to 45 minutes. So
right.
But luckily I am not a marketing person. I'm just a goofball talking to other goofballs, and like,
all good.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much, Intisar. I'm gonna in the live stream portion, we'll still be able to talk if you want, but
well, thank you so much for having me here today.
Thank you for coming. I really appreciate your time, and thanks to everyone who showed up. The only person who commented before having to run away was Misty306, who shows up for everything. Thank you so much, Misty. Love seeing you. Thanks for showing up, and hope you get to catch it later. She had to run. and then there were other people watching at various points, but Misty's the only one who said hi in the chat. So thanks to everybody who came by. Love seeing you guys. Remember that you can buy CornCon merch and CornCon Cubed merch. The links are all, go check Twitter. I've posted them, and also they're on our website. It's teespring.com/CornCon. CornCon 2020, I believe, actually. Sorry. Anyway, so thanks so much, everybody. All of those purchases helps fund this and our next CornCon in the spring, which I'm pretty sure we're actually going to run. So yeah. So it's not no official announcement yet, but it's looking more and more likely. So yeah. So thank you again, Intisar, and thanks everybody for coming. And we'll see you all next Wednesday with TL Heinrich.